Hello and welcome to this presentation on ThreeWill's Jive migration capabilities. My name is Kirk Liehmohn. I'm a principal software engineer where I focus on migrating and transforming clients to Microsoft 365. ThreeWill has a long history with Jive, including a connector, a SharePoint connector we created for them back around 2009. I was heavily involved with that project, and then starting in 2014, we created migration utilities to get ourselves off of Jive and onto SharePoint, and then we started helping clients do that as well. So we have a long history. Originally, it was with SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2013 that we were migrating to, but that quickly changed to be SharePoint Online and now Microsoft 365. With so much history and capability, we want to summarize these migration capabilities that we have. So this isn't a comprehensive list, but it does cover a lot of them, and we put this into 13 different categories. In addition, we add new and custom capabilities to meet specific business requirements all the time, especially with Microsoft 365 constantly changing. So we will be adding more over time. First, I'd like to talk about content types. We migrate the primary Jive content types that our clients really care about, and they're listed here. And there's even two custom content types that only a few clients have. That's the Jive photo albums and Jive album images. Depicted here are some examples of what these content types look like after being migrated to SharePoint specifically. But contact us for a personal walkthrough where we'll show you before and after content. We'll go into a lot of detail. We can talk about how the various content types look and what the metadata looks like, how templates can be used for consistency, where that content goes, how it's surfaced in SharePoint and Teams. In Jive, you have home pages or landing pages, and Jive allows up to 5 of those per place. We can migrate those to a SharePoint pages library. Currently, we can handle 9 different tiles or widgets. Those are components that live on a Jive home or landing page. We can migrate those to Microsoft 365. And this relies on us working with the client to set up a template and determine how that page will look, how it's laid out, where those tiles will go. Maybe there's a 2-column layout or a 3-column layout or multiple sections. And depicted here is one example of what this can look like, where you see actually several SharePoint web parts that came from those Jive tiles. Employee experience optimizers are something that we use to give a better experience for migrated content. So we have 4 different web parts that we use for this migrated content, and they're listed here. The one I'm showing now on the left is our enhanced text web part, and that's used to replace the text web part that comes out of the box with SharePoint. And it just adds a lot more capability, and it does a lot better job with Jive's HTML-based content. The one on the right is our Q&C or questions and conversations web part, which gives a richer experience for migrating Jive discussions and questions. In addition to these 4 that are part of migrations, we have many other employee experience optimizers that can be leveraged to create a modern and world-class experience. You can learn more at the link that you see here on the slide. Comments are a key component with Jive, and they have been from the start. So when Jive was built, it was built with comments thought about from the beginning. And you can have comments on any content type in Jive. It wasn't quite the case with SharePoint, but as things have been moving forward into now Microsoft 365, that has been getting better. And what we do is we migrate all those comments and we get them over there, including any rich text they have, any embedded images, embedded videos, whether an answer is correct or not. And so all that information comes over. Jive content is put into containers that they call places. There's several place types, and spaces are a type of place that are hierarchical. They can contain subspaces, whereas groups are flat. But projects live underneath groups or in spaces. So there's a little bit of hierarchy with groups in that way. There are various group types, and we handle all of those. not only migrating from them, but we handle the permissions, which I'll get to in a bit. Archive projects, while uh, are visible in the user interface, they're hidden from the API that we use to extract Jive content, but we're able to get around that. In addition, personal content is content that a user creates but with Jive but doesn't put it into a Jive place. And so we call that personal content, and we can migrate that as well. Many times clients don't want personal content migrated, but for those that do, some of those clients like for us to use like for us to migrate personal content to OneDrive, and those doing more of an archive migration like us to migrate personal content to SharePoint sites. Rationalization for Jive migrations, we call it rationalization. It's the process of mapping Jive places to SharePoint sites and specifying the details around the scope of content that is migrated. So that scope could be per place. You could say a certain Jive place is in scope or out of scope for migration, or maybe you say all spaces and groups are in scope, but projects are not. Um, you can, when we rationalize these places, we may say, oh, we want a certain place to be using a SharePoint team site versus a communication site, and maybe it'll be backed by a Microsoft team or be using a Microsoft team. Part of rationalization would also be excluding certain content types if you want to. So we can migrate events, for example, but sometimes clients don't want those migrated. Or you can filter out content based on age. Maybe you only want content that's 3 years old and newer to be migrated. And finally, we even support some custom filtering criteria as well. So you can use that to say you don't want events that occurred in the past to be migrated, um, or something marked as out of date, outdated. Transformations are an underrated capability we have with Jive migrations. We put a lot of effort into making sure that the links and other embedded content gets transformed when we migrate it to Microsoft 365. Specifically, we make sure that links within Jive content that point to other areas in Jive are transformed when it's pointing to a Jive person, a Jive place, or another Jive content item. This is also the case for embedded images and attachments and other resources where we have to migrate those items out of Jive and into Microsoft 365 and then update that reference or link accordingly. The example you see here is the content of a discussion. It has @mentioned Kirk Liehmohn, and that link in Jive goes to Kirk's profile. But after migration, we make sure that that link goes to Kirk's Microsoft 365 profile. Metadata is obviously important. So all Jive content has metadata. The obvious examples are the ones on the left there, the author, editor, created and modified dates. But in addition, Jive has some other metadata. And so we'll migrate categories, for example. Those are predefined for each Jive place as to what the categories are, and then they can be assigned to content. So we'll get that metadata if it is assigned to the content. We'll get it associated with that content when we migrate it. And then, of course, you can have tags on content. We can migrate that. Some of our clients don't like tags to be migrated, some do. And then in Jive, you can even feature content, and we can mark it as featured when it was migrated. So in here, as on the left is a list view in SharePoint showing some of that metadata on the migrated content. So each piece of content there has a set of metadata. And then on the right, we've got our advanced page properties web part, and that's showing you metadata for a piece of content, and that shows on the SharePoint page where that content is also being shown. Of course, security is important to everyone. In Jive, many places are secured and they only allow access to certain individuals. So maybe certain ones can only edit, or maybe no one has access but a certain group. And so we take that security and we migrate it to Microsoft 365. So we use the SharePoint security groups of owner, member, and visitor, which map well to Jive group permissions. And then we have an algorithm for how Jive space entitlements map to those SharePoint security groups as well. And we can be flexible with you as to when the permissions are rolled out. Typically, owner permissions are migrated immediately after migrating to Jive Place, and then member permissions are migrated when you're ready for go live. Along your journey of migration from Jive to Microsoft 365, we'll provide a lot of guidance. We've migrated many clients and draw upon that experience to help you. So initially, we'll provide a workshop. After you providing you with an inventory, and we'll assist you with rationalizing your content. We'll provide you with what we call a custom spec sheet that documents what content types are migrating and what options you're choosing. Listed here are just some of the documents we provide, and we'll provide guidance on adoption and change management. An ACM strategy and plan is critical to the success of these complex migrations. So we can go pretty deep with ACM if you don't have your own in-house capabilities in that area, and you can learn more about how we can help at the link at the bottom of this slide. After creating an inventory and assisting with rationalization and providing other initial guidance, our migration process involves a burn-in test, which validates our ability to take some of your Jive content and migrating it to Microsoft 365. We can also have a pilot to migrate a subset of Jive places where we can get all feedback on the process and incorporate that feedback into the production migration. Wave planning allows us to break the migration into different waves where you can set priority and order of the waves. Sometimes our migrations only have one wave and sometimes they have a few. During the migration, we can apply announcements to Jive places to inform users of the migration and where we are for that Jive place. We work with you to define those announcements beforehand. Of course, the migration of content is automated, but we also have some automated quality checks to make sure the counts match between the source and target. And then finally, we can do what we call a delta or incremental migration. This is a two-pass migration where there's an initial migration of all content and a final delta migration to get any changes that happen during or since that original first pass. This allows more of a big bang release process. And we go over all these options and details in our workshops and at other times when we're working with you before the actual migration process begins. All right, after the migration is complete, we can provide you with what we call a technical archive. This contains everything we were able to extract out of Jive, even the content that was specified as out of scope for the migration. It's intended only for technical and a limited audience. It's not for end users. And that's because those individuals will have access to the entire archive. And it just requires technical expertise to access it. So we have a couple of training sessions to help your team out around this to make sure you're comfortable on how to access that archive. And then finally, we provide you with reporting. So throughout the project, we'll have several reports. These are just some of the primary ones. So we have an inventory early on in the project, which I've discussed already. We can provide you with what we call a personal content report, which shows you the content of individuals that haven't put that content into places. We can also provide reports on the owners and members of the Jive places. So this is pretty useful from a communication standpoint. You can use that to email those users if you like. During the actual migration, we provide daily updates in the form of a tracking spreadsheet with a lot of detail on what has been migrated. And then we'll summarize that detail with daily charts to keep you up to date, as shown here. So that's it. In summary, we have built a lot of capabilities into our migration of Jive content, and we're proud of what we can do. Let us know if you want to see more, such as a personal walkthrough of our before and after content, and we'll work with you on that. Here's a few ways you can contact us. Thank you very much for watching this presentation on ThreeWill's Jive migration capabilities, and we hope you have a good day.